So for more reaction and insight, we now welcome Asaf Romirowsky, Executive Director at Scholars for Peace in the Middle East and co-author of Religion, Politics and the Origins of Palestine Refugee Relief. He joins us live from Philadelphia. Thank you so much for your time. So the head of UNRWA says they were in the dark. They didn't know all the staggering evidence we're looking at. They didn't know about it. Your take?
Well, I think that there's a lot of smokes and mirrors in all of this. As your correspondent said correctly, UNRWA has been colluding with Hamas for years now, and actually they've been hiring members of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They've been seeing it as an element of diversity as part of the population that they serve. UNRWA is really a case study of where the client has hijacked a service provider, and they make no distinction about any of the parties that they work with. And so it's no surprise that they teach Hamas materials, they work with Hamas, that they've been using and abusing their facilities to transport munitions. All of this is no surprise to any of us who've been observing this very, very carefully. And the fact that UNRWA itself is shocked by it, quote unquote, should be quite telling about how they've been denying the reality on the ground. But I think that finally now there's a spotlight really showcasing how immersed and how enmeshed they are inside the Hamas infrastructure at large.
And when you talk about that spotlight now revealing the extent of UNRWA's involvement in Hamas terror operations, you're not surprised. Many in this part of the world are not surprised. How much did Israel know about the agency's activities prior to the 7th of October?
I think Israel has been aware of this activity. The challenge and really the conundrum the state of Israel has been part of, this has been part of years of challenges, is that UNRWA has had a monopoly over all these services. And so the Israeli defense apparatus and really COGAT at large has been making the case that they need to work with UNRWA, as bad as UNRWA is, they still have to work with them, and there are some elements that they do positively. I would argue that UNRWA, again, is a part of the problem. They are the gatekeeper of the one single issue that maintains and sustains the conflict, and I think it's a long time that UNRWA be abolished. The issue is going to is what's going to be next. There has to be alternatives, and that has to take place to start with breaking the monopoly that UNRWA has over all these services. UNRWA currently to date, even though now donors are taking away their funds, has been receiving billions of dollars that have been coming in from the West and the Arab world in order to maintain this ongoing stasis of Palestinian refugees, and it's a fallacious status altogether. But I think it's a long time that UNRWA start, get out of the picture, and we move on to something better for the benefit of the people that it claims to serve.
When it comes specifically, and you've alluded to it, the education in terms of UNRWA, looking at the next generation for Palestinians both in Gaza and in the West Bank, UNRWA has been claiming to teach children values of peace and tolerance and non-violent conflict resolution. But according to various studies, when you look at the curriculum, which is taught by UNRWA, the opposite is true. The textbooks are showing Jews as enemies of Islam. Obviously, martyrs are being glorified, as is jihad. How does one tackle this, change the teachings, change the textbooks, change the narrative in the long term?
Well, you're absolutely 100% right. I mean, UNRWA has been exactly teaching Hamas education. They're glorifying martyrology and jihadism. It's child abuse what they're doing. And so, as I said, the problem is UNRWA is the largest employer of Palestinians, and their number one function happens to be education. All the teachers need to be out of this. I mean, they are colluding. They are Hamas. If you're going to be talking about peace education in any way, shape, or form, you have to have outside providers doing this. Back in the 90s and during the Oslo years, there was a push that everybody changed their textbooks. Israeli textbooks were already pro-peace. Palestinian textbooks led by Hamas education were not. And this is exactly what you're producing. You're producing child martyrs. You're producing Hamas members. You're creating this ongoing narrative from generation to generation. UNRWA is the only UN agency, refugee agency, sorry, that uniquely defines Arab Palestinian refugees in perpetuity. It is child abuse all around, and the kind of education that they're producing ensures the fact you're creating more and more active members who are going to be part of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade, any terrorist Islamist organization. They see it part and parcel. And if you're going to change that, that needs to change now. Every U.S. congressional demand for years now, since the 1960s and 70s, has demanded a change to the textbooks. And it's long overdue that it happens now, yesterday for that matter.
So if it happens now, yesterday for that matter, who replaces UNRWA? What entity, what organization, who could be trusted with that task?
I think that there has to be a breakdown of this monopoly that I'm talking about, and it can be done if you're going to use the United Nations potentially or other countries. You could break down all these services, whether it's UNICEF for kids, WHO for medical directors. I mean, again, the United Nations at large is a problematic entity, but if you're going to begin with, you got to start breaking the monopoly. Beyond that, I would say that you could look at, if there are other Arab countries who are going to be part of the day after tomorrow, and if we're talking about potentially the Egyptians and Jordanians, if they are willing to play ball in this regard, then there has to be a potential change. But overall, there also has to be oversight, and the oversight also has to come from Israel. And again, the kind of education they're producing, they're involved in systems, the university systems inside of Israel, Arab Israelis. There are models that could be looked at, but they have to be adopted, and they have to create that infrastructure. To date, UNRWA cannot tell you. And if you ever ask them about an audit, how much money they spend on education, laptops, and whatnot, it's all one big black hole. But you have to start by breaking the monopoly and weaning Palestinian society off of UNRWA. Because to date, as we know, and we have seen from all the evidence, UNRWA is part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Many challenges ahead in getting to that solution. So appreciate your insight as always. Thank you so much. We need to leave it there now. Asaf Romirowsky, live from Philadelphia. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.